My father looked at me across the Thanksgiving table, fork halfway to his mouth, and said the thing he'd been saying since I turned 12. You sure you're mine, Nate? He said it like a joke. The same joke. For 16 years. My uncles laughed because that's what you do when Dale Brennan makes a joke. You laugh or you sit in the silence he creates until someone does. I was 28 years old, and I wasn't laughing anymore. I was holding an envelope in my jacket pocket, and what was inside it would put him on the floor of that dining room, send his brother scrambling for a phone, and rewrite every cruel joke he'd ever made into the single worst mistake of his life. He said I wasn't his. He had no idea how right he was, or how wrong, or how much proving it would cost him everything. Welcome back to Hidden Family Secrets, where the loudest voice in the room is usually covering up the biggest lie. If you've ever been the punchline in your own family, this one's for you. Drop a comment and don't forget to subscribe. You have to understand what a man like Dale Brennan is in a town like ours. High school football legend. Owns the only Ford dealership in 3 counties. The kind of man who never apologizes because he's never had to. People forgive a man like that for almost anything if he smiles when he says it. So when he started asking me whose kid I really was, people thought it was funny. It started the summer I turned 12. I came back from camp taller, leaner, darker-haired. My dad and my older brother Kyle were both blonde, broad-shouldered, built like the linebackers they'd been. I was none of those things. I came back looking like someone else's son, and my father noticed. At first, it was small, a head tilt at the dinner table, a long look when I walked past him in the hall. Then one night, grilling burgers in the backyard with his buddies, he said it out loud for the first time. Linda, you sure the hospital gave us the right one? My mother laughed it off. The men laughed with her. I was 12. I didn't understand what he was really asking, but I felt it. The way you feel a door close that you didn't know was open. By the time I was 16, the joke had teeth. Mailman's kid, he'd say, slapping my shoulder at family barbecues. Got my wife's looks and some other guy's build. Everyone would laugh. My mother would smile that smile she'd perfected, the one that didn't reach her eyes, and I would go find somewhere else to be. I want to be fair to him, even now. He wasn't a monster. Monsters are easier to hate. Dale Brennan was a man who worshipped his own reflection and couldn't find it in me. And to a proud man, that absence felt like betrayal. So he built a story around it, and he made me live inside that story like it was a house with no doors. The cruelty wasn't that he doubted me, it's that he turned his doubt into a performance and made me the audience for 28 years. Here's what that does to you. You become small. You learn to apologize for things you didn't do. You stop taking up space at the table. You date people who don't treat you well because bad treatment feels like home. I spent my 20s working as a forensic accountant, a job where you find mistakes other people made and prove them with numbers, and I never once connected the dots that I'd chosen a profession built on evidence because I'd spent my whole childhood being told I was the evidence of my mother's lie. I lived alone. I didn't talk to my father unless I had to. I showed up to holidays, endured the jokes, and left early. My mother would call the next day and apologize for him, and I'd tell her it was fine, and we'd both pretend we believed it. Then my brother Kyle got married. And at the rehearsal dinner, in front of 60 people, my father stood up to give a toast, looked right at me and said, I've got one son I know is mine, and one I'm still taking bets on. The room went silent for a second, then someone laughed, and the room followed because that's what rooms do. I set my glass down. I didn't yell. Yelling was what he wanted. I just walked out into the parking lot, got in my car, and sat there with my hands on the wheel, shaking. My mother found me 20 minutes later. She got in the passenger seat, and for the first time in my entire life, she didn't make excuses for him. He's wrong, she said quietly. And I can prove it. I looked at her. She was staring straight ahead, jaw tight, hands folded in her lap like she was holding something fragile. I never cheated on him, Nate. Not once. Not ever. And I'm tired of letting him say I did. That's when she told me about the blood type. My mother kept everything. Every birthday card, every report card, every scrap of paper that said I existed. She pulled a box down from the top of her closet that night and went through it piece by piece until she found what she was looking for. My original hospital record from the day I was born. She handed it to me without a word. I'm a forensic accountant. I find discrepancies for a living. I read documents the way some people read faces. And the discrepancy on that page was so glaring, I actually laughed. Blood type, B positive. I'd donated blood in college. I was O positive. I had the card in my wallet. Mom, I said slowly, this says I'm B positive. She nodded. I'm O positive. I've been O positive since I was 18. I know. So either this record is wrong, or the hospital made a mistake when you were born, she finished. And if they made that mistake, they could have made others. I sat there holding a 28-year-old piece of paper that didn't match reality, and something my mother had said a long time ago came rushing back. She'd told me once, late at night when I was maybe 13 and couldn't sleep, about the night I was born. How there'd been a power outage, how the nurses had been frantic, how she'd been so exhausted she couldn't remember half of it. There was a storm, she said now, her voice distant. The lights went out. And when they brought you back to me after they cleaned you up, I remember thinking you looked different than I remembered. But I was so tired, Nate, and they told me you were mine. So I believed them. She looked at me with something I'd never seen in her face before. Not hope. Clarity. What if he's been right all along? She whispered. What if you're not his? Not because I cheated, because they gave us the wrong baby. I could have dismissed it. I wanted to. But I'm a man who deals in evidence, and the evidence was staring me in the face. 2 blood types. 1 storm. 28 years of a father who couldn't see himself in his son. I ordered the DNA test that night. My father refused at first. Of course he did. The joke only worked if it stayed a joke. The second it became a real question, he'd lose control of it. But my mother drew a line I'd never seen her draw before. You've spent 28 years accusing me in front of everyone we know, she told him on the phone, voice steady and cold. Now you're going to take a test and prove it, or you're going to stop saying it. Pick one. He showed up 3 days later, walked into my apartment like he owned it, swabbed his cheek, sealed the envelope, and said, "When this comes back and proves he's mine, I want an apology." He wasn't talking to me. He was talking to my mother, who stood in my kitchen with her arms crossed and said nothing at all. I mailed the test the same day. The website said 2 weeks. Those 2 weeks were the longest of my life. I spent those 14 days doing what I do best, investigating. I requested my full medical records from the hospital where I was born. I found the birth logs from that night. I pulled weather reports from March of 1996. I built a timeline the way I'd build a case. Here's what I found. March 14th, 1996. Severe thunderstorm. Power outage at County General Hospital from 11:47 p.m. to 12:15 a.m. 2 male infants born within 30 minutes of each other. One to Linda Brennan, one to a woman named Carla Voss. I found Carla Voss on Facebook in under an hour. She lived 2 towns over. She had a son named Miles, and Miles Voss was 28 years old, blonde, broad-shouldered, and built exactly like my father and brother. I stared at his profile picture for 20 minutes. He looked like a Brennan. I looked like someone else. I didn't reach out. Not yet. Because the envelope was already in the mail and I needed to see the numbers first. I needed the paper to tell me what my gut already knew. The results came back on a Tuesday. I opened them alone in my apartment at 6 in the morning before work. My hands didn't shake. I've audited companies for fraud. I've sat across from executives and shown them proof they'd been stealing. I know how to stay calm when the floor drops out, but when I read the first line, I had to sit down. Probability of paternity. Dale Brennan to Nathan Brennan, 0%. He wasn't my father. I read it 3 times. Then I read the second page. The maternity test I'd added at the last minute just to be sure. Probability of maternity. Linda Brennan to Nathan Brennan, 0%. Neither of them were my biological parents. My mother had never cheated. The hospital had given her the wrong child, and my father had spent 28 years punishing her for a crime she didn't commit, and punishing me for a face I didn't choose. I called my mother first, told her to sit down. Then I read her the results. She didn't cry, she laughed. It was the saddest sound I've ever heard. I told him, she said. I told him for 28 years. Then I called my father. I didn't tell him over the phone. I told him to come to my mother's house. Told him I had the results and we'd go over them together. He showed up 30 minutes later with that same smug look he'd worn the day he swabbed his cheek. He thought he was about to win. My mother and I were sitting at the kitchen table when he walked in. I'd printed the report. It was sitting in the center of the table, face down. "Well?" he said. I slid it across to him. "You were right," I said. "I'm not yours." He picked it up. I watched his face as he read the first line. Watched the grin start. Watched him look at my mother like he'd been waiting 28 years for this exact moment. "I knew it," he started. "Keep reading," I said. He looked down, read the second line, and the color drained out of his face. "What does this mean?" he said. "It means she didn't cheat on you," I said, voice steady. "It means the hospital gave her the wrong baby. It means you've spent 28 years calling me the mailman's kid when the truth is, I'm someone else's son and you've been raising him like a joke." He sat down hard. The chair scraped. "That's not—" "There were 2 boys born that night," I said. "One to Linda Brennan, one to Carla Voss. The power went out, and when it came back on, the babies got switched. I found the logs, I found the other family, and I found your actual son." I slid a printed photo across the table. Miles Voss, blonde, broad, undeniably a Brennan. My father stared at it, then at me, then at my mother. "You raised the wrong kid," I said quietly. "And the real one's been living 20 minutes away his whole life, looking exactly like you, while you spent 3 decades making me the punchline." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. "I didn't know," he whispered. "You didn't ask," I said. "You just assumed. You built a whole story about Mom being unfaithful, and you performed it at every holiday, every dinner, every family event for 28 years, and it was a lie. The cruelty wasn't that you doubted, it's that you made your doubt everyone else's problem and never once considered you might be wrong." My mother hadn't said a word. She just sat there with her hands folded, watching him. And then my father's face did something I'd never seen it do. It crumpled, not with sadness, with the weight of 28 years of certainty collapsing inward all at once. "Where is he said, voice breaking. "Where's my son?" "I don't know yet," I said. "I haven't reached out. I wanted you to see this first." He stood up. He took 2 steps toward the door, and then his knees just gave out. He didn't fall dramatically, he just folded, one hand catching the counter, the other pressed to his chest. He went down slow, mouth open, eyes wide. My mother didn't move, I did. Not because I wanted to, because some part of me that spent 28 years trying to be his son moved before I could stop it. I got him into a chair, checked his pulse, his breathing. No heart attack. Just a man whose body had finally felt the thing his brain refused to process. He sat there, head in his hands, and said the only true thing he'd said to me in years. "I ruined it. I ruined all of it." "Yeah," I said. "You did." The hospital admitted fault within 6 weeks. Turns out when you're a forensic accountant, you know exactly how to file a formal complaint, exactly which regulatory bodies to notify, and exactly how to make a paper trail that an institution can't ignore. The power outage was documented. The 2 births were documented. And buried in an incident report from 1996 was a nurse's note about a possible bassinet mix-up during temporary lighting failure that had been flagged and then, apparently, forgotten. The hospital settled quietly. I didn't ask for money. I asked for an apology, in writing, sent to both families, and I asked them to facilitate contact with the Voss family if they were willing. They were. Miles Voss and I met on a Saturday in April at a coffee shop halfway between our 2 towns. We sat across from each other, 2 men who'd lived each other's lives, and the resemblance was impossible to miss. He looked like my brother Kyle. I looked like his mother. "This is the weirdest thing that's ever happened to me," he said. "Same," I said. We talked for 3 hours. He'd had a good childhood, loving parents, no jokes, no doubt. Carla and Tom Voss had raised him well, and he'd never questioned whether he belonged. I was glad. I didn't want his life to have been like mine. "Does your dad know about me?" he asked. "Yeah." "Does he want to meet me?" I thought about that, about my father sitting in that chair with his head in his hands, about the 28 years he'd spent so sure of himself. I think he's afraid to, I said honestly. Miles nodded. He got it. We exchanged numbers. We said we'd stay in touch. And we have. Not as brothers. We didn't grow up that way. But as two people who share a strange, sad story and got each other out of it. My father tried to apologize. He called me 2 weeks after the collapse and said he wanted to make it right. I told him the same thing I tell clients when they've cooked the books for years and finally want to clean up. You don't get to make this right. You get to stop making it worse. He asked what that meant. I told him, you're going to stop telling the joke. You're going to tell Kyle and the rest of the family what really happened. You're going to apologize to Mom, out loud, in front of the same people you humiliated her in front of. And then you're going to leave me alone until I decide whether I want you in my life. He said, okay. His voice was small. I didn't forgive him. Forgiveness isn't something you give because someone asks. It's something that maybe grows over time if the person earns it. He hasn't earned it yet. But he did stop. The jokes ended. He told the family. And at Kyle's wedding 6 months later, he stood up and said in front of everyone that he'd been wrong about me and wrong about my mother for 28 years. It didn't fix anything, but it was the first time in my life he'd let the truth be louder than his pride. My mother's the one who surprised me most. After the results came in, after the collapse, after everything, I thought she'd fall apart. Instead, she filed for divorce. I stayed for 28 years because I thought I had to prove I was faithful, she told me. The test proved it. I don't have to stay anymore. She's living in a condo by the lake now. She's happy. I see her every week. And when people ask her about me, she doesn't say, my son. She says, my Nate. Because biology's just one kind of truth. The other kind is who shows up, who stays, who loves you when the paper says they don't have to. She chose me. That's the part that matters. I spent 28 years being told I didn't belong. And the day I stopped trying to prove I did, I found out belonging was never his to give or take away. The joke wasn't on me. It was never on me. A blood type that didn't match. A storm in 1996. A man so certain of his own story he never questioned it until the paper made him. If someone spent your whole life making you the punchline, get the test. Find the paper. Let the truth do what noise never could. And if this hit you somewhere deep, share it with someone who needs it. Tell me in the comments what truth you're still holding on to. And subscribe to Hidden Family Revenge, where the quiet ones always have the last word.